For more than a century, the distinctive triangular structure at 23rd Street has shaped New York's skyline. Known as the Flatiron, it features a limestone foundation and terracotta facade, with a form so unique that even kids spot it before learning what to call it. This single edifice boasts more photos than nearly any other structure globally. It pops up in films, artwork, and ads alike. Designers analyze it closely. Visitors flock from afar to see it. And advocates battled for years to shield it from the wrecking ball. In the end, they won. The building endured. Yet enduring isn't the same as thriving. From 2019 onward, the Flatiron has remained vacant, shuttered, unlit, and dormant. This tale explores what unfolds when a landmark grows too treasured to tear down and too limited to revive. Prior to the Flatiron's emergence, the parcel at the intersection of Fifth Avenue and Broadway seemed largely impractical. The issue stemmed from its layout. Back in 1811, Manhattan's layout followed a grid of straight lines. Streets stretched east-west, while avenues headed south-north. This setup functioned smoothly, almost everywhere, except where ancient diagonal paths sliced through the modern design. Broadway had begun as a Lenape trail snaking along a natural ridge over the island. As the grid overlaid the terrain, Broadway persisted, slicing across the new streets at sharp angles and forming odd triangular parcels at each crossing. Many of these sites were tiny and cumbersome. Builders tackled them only when necessary, opting for short, simple edifices that avoided tricky supports. Ambitious high-rises, unthinkable. The spot at 23rd Street proved especially tricky, narrowing to a mere 29 feet at its pointed tip. The broader end spanned roughly 190 feet along Broadway and another 190 feet down Fifth Avenue, yielding just over 18,000 square feet in total. That might seem ample at first glance, but the elongated, tapered form made it ill-suited for typical commercial purposes. A slender wedge that defied conventional layouts. Throughout much of the 1800s, a modest dwelling occupied the site, viewed as nothing special. Its position was prime, though. Madison Square sat only a block away, drawing in theaters, eateries, and inns to the area. Still, the parcel's odd contours deterred major investment. Offices demanded boxy rooms where desks aligned neatly against flat surfaces and layouts followed predictable patterns. The triangle delivered none of that. Everything shifted in 1899. The George A. Fuller Company, a Chicago-based outfit expert in frame construction, relied on steel skeletons rather than heavy stone walls to support edifices. This approach enabled soaring heights with minimal resources. In the 1890s, Fuller had erected some of the Windy City's loftiest towers. Eager for a New York base to showcase their expertise, they sought a bold statement. Harry S. Black took the reins after Fuller's passing in 1900, grasping how striking design could serve as promotion. A headquarters wasn't merely functional, it signaled reliability to potential clients, proving a firm's prowess. Black hunted for terrain that would highlight their ability to conquer tough sites, and the 23rd Street Triangle matched ideally. They purchased the land in 1901. Records don't specify the cost, though later reports indicate the sellers accepted a reasonable figure, figuring few would bid higher on such an quirky plot. Black wasted no time engaging an architect. The pick was straightforward. Daniel Hudson Burnham, a leading figure in American design. He had crafted numerous structures for Chicago's 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, dubbed the White City, which dazzled millions by blending bold ideas with solid engineering. Post-fair, projects poured in nationwide. His work fused timeless symmetry with cutting-edge steel frameworks, earning faith in his knack for elegance and endurance. When Black pitched the triangular commission, Burnham jumped at it. The challenge wasn't the scale. Steel could easily support 22 levels. Rather, it was the footprint. At its slimmest, the site needed a base that spread loads uniformly over limited ground. Burnham collaborated with specialists on a fix involving sturdy steel pilings driven into Manhattan's solid schist. This directed pressure downward, not outward. The exterior posed yet another hurdle. Opting for a French Renaissance aesthetic with tall, elegant lines and balanced details. Burnham specified Indiana limestone for the ground level, a staple in elite constructions of the era. Higher stories would get terracotta facing, durable, lightweight, and craftable into ornate motifs, then baked for flame-proofing. While terracotta proved more affordable than stone, it delivered a comparable aesthetic appeal when seen from afar. Media outlets following the development started calling it Burnham's folly, implying the designer had embarked on a doomed endeavor destined for collapse. Detractors highlighted the slender base, warning that gusts battering the towering sides would impose enormous pressure. In fierce gales or tempests, the edifice might well topple. Such doubts made sense at the time. Though New York boasted numerous skyscrapers, none had risen on such an odd-shaped parcel. Work commenced in 1901. Teams dug out the groundwork, cutting through debris and landfill until striking the solid bedrock below. Sturdy steel pilings were hammered in deeply. Concrete was then cast around them to form a sturdy footing. In the initial stages of 1902, steel girders started ascending. The skeleton assembled swiftly, level by level, until it loomed over Madison Square. Burnham supervised each element closely. The terracotta sections were fabricated according to his precise designs. Glass panes were fitted to allow ample daylight inside while shielding against excessive warmth. A lift connected every one of the 22 levels. Radiant steam heat and up-to-date pipes guaranteed livability for occupants to come. On October 1, 1902, the structure threw open its doors. Doubts evaporated right away. It remained steadfast. Breezes racing across Madison Square failed to bring it down. Rather, they produced an unforeseen phenomenon, a funneling of air. Currents sped up as they flowed past the slim front. Ladies, strolling along the pavement, suddenly faced blasts that hoisted their hems. Lads started congregating nearby to observe. Officers had to break up the crowds. Legend has it, this led to the saying, quote, "Zero," the idiom seeped into everyday U.S. lingo. Even if scholars still argue over its precise roots, images started proliferating at once. The edifice's profile looked striking, no matter the viewpoint. Snappers positioned themselves in Madison Square to frame the complete wedge shape. Some took shots from the pavement, underscoring how it dwarfed everything around. Alfred Stieglitz, a key figure in early American photography, snapped multiple shots of the Flatiron in 1903. His work elevated it to artistic status beyond mere technical feat. Artists lent their visions, too. Edward Steichen produced moody scenes with the tower veiled in fog. Alvin Langdon Coburn shot it at dusk when interior lamps shone out through the panes. John Sloan rendered the scene from his loft, depicting the Flatiron commanding the plaza. In short order, it featured in more artistic pieces than many ancient landmarks. The Fuller firm claimed multiple levels for its headquarters. Other suites went to businesses chasing a high-status spot. Bookhouses showed special interest. The slim rooms fit perfectly for outfits focused on workstations and archives, not vast workspaces. The lease rates stayed reasonable for such prime real estate. Vacancies vanished fast. What was meant as a ridiculous gamble turned into a swift legend. Burnham showed a tricky site could support bold design. Black received his goal, a showcase proclaiming the Fuller outfit's prowess to all who traversed Madison Square. Folks commonly called it the Flatiron Building instead of the formal Fuller Building. Its outline set its character. The metal framework that made the Flatiron possible counted as fresh innovation, in 1902. Older high-rises depended on hefty stonework for support. Greater heights meant broader footings at the bottom. That approach capped how tall things could get. Ground-level rooms got swallowed by those massive bases, leaving them impractical. The metal framework changed that. Upright posts and cross-members formed a skeleton bearing the full burden. Outer sheathing turned into mere cladding draped over it, not essential for stability. Designers could thus reach new heights without losing usable area inside. William LeBaron-Jenney applied this in Chicago's home insurance building in 1885. Hailed as the nation's debut skyscraper. When the Fuller team brought on Burnham, the technique had already succeeded in scores of projects. The Flatiron employed metal uprights arrayed across the wedge lot. Joists linked them, forming a firm grid per story. Slab floors sat atop the joists. All loads funneled downward via the posts to anchors in Manhattan schist. The skin on the outside clung to the metal, but carried zero weight. Selecting terracotta for the higher-level surface addressed key functional needs. Terracotta weighed less than stone, easing the burden on the underlying framework. It allowed architects to shape intricate details prior to baking, offering creative freedom. Once baked in intense heat, it gained resistance to flames, a crucial attribute during times when fires posed ongoing risks to structures. The lowest 4 levels featured Indiana limestone cladding, establishing a sturdy, conventional foundation that conveyed strength and status. Burnham organized the exterior into 3 distinct vertical zones. The foundation level extended across 4 stories, incorporating limestone surfaces and expansive ground-floor windows designed for retail spaces. The central portion ascended from the 5th through the 18th floor, where terracotta echoed columnar motifs to accentuate the structure's height. The uppermost section included the top 4 floors, adorned with elaborate terracotta work, and a corniced roofline that capped the edifice. Overall, the design adhered to classical ratios, even as it employed contemporary materials and building techniques. Glazing dominated the walls to ensure plentiful illumination. Commercial offices demanded ample daylight. While electric power was available, it proved costly and inconsistent. Occupants sought areas lit naturally for much of their workday. Burnham arranged the windows to capture optimal sunlight without compromising the facade's stability. Robust steel mullions segmented each into smaller panels, capable of resisting the winds at such elevations. The gusts posed a genuine issue. Madison Square, an expansive plaza hemmed in by taller edifices, funneled breezes toward the building. Air currents sped up as they curved past the slender northern facade, generating fierce blasts near the ground. This spectacle caught the eye of those nearby. Local papers described episodes of headwear flying away. Ladies clutched their hems. As noted before, youths congregated to observe until authorities dispersed them. Within, the interior plans adapted to the site's triangular contours. None of the levels provided the boxy rooms favored by typical businesses. Rather, every story featured elongated, slim hallways that stretched from the broad southern base to the pointed northern apex. Workspaces flanked these passages, each claiming a thin portion of the space. At the northern extremity, chambers were so compact they accommodated just one workstation and storage unit. This unconventional configuration deterred certain enterprises. Organizations requiring vast, undivided areas for sizable teams struggled to adapt to the wedge-shaped plans. Yet many thrived in them. Publishing houses, legal practices, design studios, and compact professional outfits deemed the slender suites ideal. The Madison Square address lent an air of distinction. Leasing rates were competitive against other contemporary towers. Proximity to transit and dining options added appeal. The Fuller Company claimed multiple levels for its Manhattan offices. The rest went to diverse occupants. By 1905, occupancy approached completion. Proprietors easily secured firms ready to navigate the irregular design for the prestige of residing in the city's signature tower. From 1902 onward, the edifice emerged as a swift icon. Locals referenced it in navigation instructions. Images proliferated. Souvenir cards of the Flatiron flew off shelves in vast numbers. Media outlets reproduced shots in travel literature and promotional materials, touting New York as a hub of progress. The wedge silhouette stood out uniquely, even for those unfamiliar with the metropolis. Creatives captured it in canvases and lenses persistently. Seasons infused fresh atmospheres. Snow blanketed the terracotta in winter. Spring sunlight filtered gently across the park. Fall evenings bathed the surface in amber and crimson hues. Every depiction varied. The structure shifted with atmospheric conditions, daylight hours, and vantage points. Photographers discovered endless inspiration in its form. Its triumph validated key principles. Primarily, terrain dismissed as worthless could yield marvels when guided by engineering-savvy design. Additionally, status commanded premium rents. Businesses invested in the 23 Madison Square prestige, inconvenience notwithstanding. Moreover, audiences embraced daring forms. Burnham's audacious project evolved into a symbol, thriving on its peculiar profile. Over the initial 20 years, it operated precisely as Black envisioned. A showcase for Fuller Company's expertise, a revenue generator for stakeholders, an emblem of urban innovation for all. Leasing patterns steadied, upkeep stayed straightforward. The metal core avoided the upkeep demands of solid masonry. The terracotta exterior endured exposure gracefully. No significant calamities befell it. The blazes that razed numerous structures across Manhattan somehow bypassed the Flatiron. Its combination of terracotta and steel ensured far better fireproofing than the outdated wooden frameworks of earlier buildings. Elevator malfunctions were uncommon. The steam-based heating system held up dependably across cold seasons. Upkeep for the Flatiron aligned with standard practices for any major commercial site, demanding no exceptional measures. Come the 1920s, the Flatiron had become a fixture in New York's urban scene. Soaring new structures were popping up throughout Manhattan. Work on the Empire State Building kicked off in 1929, leading to its 1931 debut at 281 meters tall. The Chrysler Building topped 300 meters. At just 77 meters, the Flatiron trailed far behind in height rankings. But it stayed the prime subject for snapshots. It loomed prominently over Madison Square, imposing yet approachable in scale. That distinctive shape proved timeless. During its opening 6 decades, the Flatiron hummed with constant energy. Businesses cycled through, yet it maintained near-capacity occupancy for much of those years. The array of occupants mirrored fluctuations in Manhattan's commerce and the wider shifts in U.S. enterprise. Publishing outfits led the way in the initial years. Operations like the Frank Muncie Company claimed several stories. Muncie produced periodicals and dailies, such as Muncie's Magazine, which climbed to 600,000 readers at its height. The tight-fitting offices suited newsrooms ideally. Reporters made do with basic setups, desks, typewriters, storage files, without craving wide-open areas. The 23 Madison Square mailing address lent an air of legitimacy to their output. Design studios in architecture also claimed leases. The selection carried a deliberate twist of irony. Practitioners could highlight to prospects that their base was in one of the nation's iconic structures, underscoring a grasp of superior aesthetics. The slim rooms offered seclusion for discussions with clients, complemented by on-site meeting areas for displays and feedback sessions. Photography operations set up in the higher levels. The flood of daylight via the panes created prime conditions for headshots and ad shoots. Being smack in central Manhattan made it simple for customers to swing by for appointments. A few lensmen honed in on panoramas visible from the Flatiron's glass, hawking pictures of Madison Square to sightseers and enthusiasts. Legal offices took root inside as well. Compact practices grabbed individual suites, whereas bigger operations secured full levels. An in-house law library, jointly funded by users, catered to plenty of residents. The hallway design enabled low-key access to distinct workspaces, a plus for clientele valuing discretion. Into the 1930s, the blend of renters held steady. Fields like the arts, advisory professions, and outfits, chasing a high-profile spot without massive layouts. The Flatiron couldn't match fresh towers for raw volume. What it delivered instead was distinctiveness, charm, backstory, notoriety. The Great Depression shook up leasing habits, though milder than one might assume. Certain ventures collapsed, some trimmed their footprints, but the site's draw kept it from gaping voids. Landlords swiftly secured replacements. Pricing bent during lean spells. Managers opted for slimmer profits over drawn-out empty stretches. World War II ushered in additional adjustments. Federal outfits snapped up office spots all over Manhattan for defense-related tasks. The Flatiron took in a handful of compact war support units. Once peace returned, those quarters flipped back to everyday commerce. The post-war surge in business drew a fresh influx of corporate renters. Reaching its 50th year in the 1950s, the Flatiron showed enduring strength. The metal framework stayed robust. The clay exterior had patined nicely, save for spots where dampness had split panels needing swaps. Utility setups hinted at wear. Lifts called for repeated servicing. The steam system chugged along. If not as sleekly as updated tech, water lines occasionally gave out. Stewards funneled cash into ongoing care, holding off on sweeping modernizations. Market conditions shunned hefty outlays. It churned reliable lease revenue against contained repair bills. Overhauls on that scale could have run into millions and forced temporary tenant displacements. The downside didn't warrant the leap. By the 1960s, preservation status loomed large. The city grappled with vanishing treasures at a frantic clip. Pennsylvania Station, an opulent Beaux-Arts creation by McKim, Mead, and White, got torn down in 1963, fueling massive public backlash. That loss fueled anger and galvanized campaigners to seek statutory shields for key edifices. The New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission, launched in 1965. The next year brought the Flatiron, its official landmark nod. This safeguard barred any teardown and insisted on panel review for substantial tweaks to the exterior or vital inner features. Even if the land's value surpassed that of the structure itself, proprietors were barred from demolishing the Flatiron building outright. While the landmark status offered safeguards, it also came with limitations. Any renovations demanded oversight from the commission. Alterations to the exterior were scrutinized closely. Property holders were obligated to preserve the outer look in line with its initial blueprint. From a historical conservation standpoint, these rules were logical. They shielded the distinctive wedge-shaped landmark from short-sighted decisions by later owners. Yet they curtailed adaptability. The demands of contemporary workplaces increasingly clashed with the Flatiron building's capabilities. Businesses craved expansive, barrier-free layouts. Tech setups called for advanced power grids and ventilation. Cooling units evolved from optional to essential. In contrast, the Flatiron building featured cramped rooms, obsolete cabling, and inconsistent temperature management. Upgrading this would involve ripping into partitions and weaving fresh utilities across the entire edifice. During the 1970s and 1980s, leasing certain areas grew tougher. Big enterprises seeking cutting-edge workspaces looked elsewhere. Modest outfits, without needs for top-tier setups, stuck with spaces in the Flatiron building. Occupancy fluctuated. Certain periods saw fresh arrivals, while others brought exits. Managers kept the property solvent. Though profits dwindled, its iconic status remained undiminished. Films often used the Flatiron building as a quintessential New York visual. Images of it popped up in guidebooks, planners, and ads. Painters captured its form. Aspiring architects analyzed its structure. Visitors flocked to Madison Square just to view it. Among New York structures, only perhaps the Statue of Liberty or the Empire State Building matched its immediate identifiability. Yet renown alone couldn't cover upkeep expenses. Into the 1990s, the Flatiron building cried out for major interventions. Its terracotta exterior demanded thorough fixes. Small fissures widened into serious issues as moisture infiltrated and iced over in cold months, worsening the harm. Certain sections were detaching, endangering those on the street below. Protective frameworks went up around sections of the frontage during the fixes. Within, the lifts needed overhauls. The inaugural mechanisms, fitted at build time, had endured almost a century, an impressive nod to their durability. But eternity eluded them. Replacements involved contemporary engines, enclosures, and operations. The process was costly and intrusive for occupants. Power and water lines also begged for updates. The vintage electrical setup wasn't built for the loads from PCs, copiers, and gear crowding today's offices. Where feasible, managers threaded additional lines via current conduits and hallways, though a full refresh meant dismantling barriers building-wide. In the closing years of the 1900s, the Flatiron building switched owners repeatedly. Every successor in the 1990s took on identical hurdles: a prime location, legendary design, deteriorating facilities, and rigidity from preservation rules. Lease income held firm, but fell short of the multi-million-dollar sum for a comprehensive redo. As the 1990s wrapped up, the trend solidified. The Flatiron building enjoyed acclaim in the spotlight but suffered in the shadows. Admirers abounded, yet willingness to fund repairs was scarce. Unaddressed wear piled up, aggravating matters annually. Entering the 2000s, fresh pressures emerged for the Flatiron building. Today's work environments needed setups the 1902 structure couldn't accommodate. Unobstructed layouts turned standard. Firms desired areas for teams to interact freely, sans dividers. The Flatiron building's elongated, slim passages, flanked by tiny rooms, embodied the antithesis of such preferences. Its ventilation barely operated. The century-old steam heat persisted, but noisily, wastefully, and without per-level regulation. Cooling additions, tacked on sporadically over time, yielded a spotty network with inconsistent performance. Some rooms sweltered in heat waves, others chilled in frosts. Residents griped often. The power lines couldn't support the surge from today's devices. Workspaces brimming with PCs, networks, imaging machines, and gadgets outstripped available circuits. Managers added wiring as possible, but a thorough revamp entailed gutting walls and overheads everywhere. Expenses would mount sky-high. Tenant interruptions would prove substantial. The waterworks betrayed their vintage. Conduits from the original build had held up impressively, but perpetuity isn't real. Drips multiplied, flow varied. Certain restrooms sported outdated hardware, predating most users. Revamping the full plumbing setup would require tearing into walls across all levels, essentially gutting the structure internally. The elevators, updated back in the 1990s, continued to function, yet their limited quantity created ongoing issues. With just 4 cars handling 22 stories, employees endured waits of several minutes during busy periods. Contemporary office towers offered greater capacity and quicker rides. For the Flatiron, No straightforward fix was possible. Space constraints prevented installing additional shafts without compromising essential elements. In the 1990s, the property changed hands to Harry M. Lowe, a key figure in New York real estate development. He grasped the asset's worth alongside its difficulties. Positioned on 17,000 square feet of prime Manhattan land, it held value in the tens of millions despite its unusual shape. Landmark designation blocked any easy teardown and rebuild. MLO explored, transforming it into condos. High-end residences in this legendary New York landmark could command extraordinary sums. The spot was ideal. Upper-level vistas swept over Madison Square and wide swaths of Manhattan. The aura of history would deliver prestige unmatched by fresh constructions. But the idea hit roadblocks right away. The Landmarks Preservation Commission had to greenlight substantial internal alterations. Shifting to residential use demanded a total overhaul of each floor. Partitions would come down, fresh piping configurations plus kitchens and baths, all needed integration. Elements like hallways, stairs, and decorative details would probably stay intact. The commission turned it down. Rules for safeguarding landmarks stressed upholding the building's original essence. Repurposing the Flatiron from commercial to residential would alter its core layout. Officials noted it had functioned as offices since 1902. That role defined its heritage. Such a shift would wipe away that legacy. McClough wound up selling it off. The finances didn't add up sans the condo pivot. Rental revenue kept flowing but fell short of covering the massive outlay for upgrades while keeping it commercial. Subsequent purchasers inherited the bind. Then, in 2005, fresh interest emerged. Sorgenti Group, an Italian firm focused on buying and restoring historic sites, stepped in. They targeted emblematic properties. Holdings spanned Europe and the U.S. The Flatiron matched their strategy. Distinctive design, top-tier site, promise of enduring growth. Sentiente shelled out around $190 million in 2018, though reports vary on the precise amount. The sum captured the site's worth and the structure's upside. The company outlined a careful upgrade to update infrastructure without harming its heritage. Early surveys uncovered issues graver than anticipated. The terracotta exterior showed fissures in numerous spots. Moisture had infiltrated tiny gaps over years, corroding the underlying steel skeleton. Certain beams displayed rust. Fixes involved removing and swapping facade segments level by level. Internal utilities cried out for total renewal. Wiring, pipes, heating, and cooling all outdated. Upgrading entailed bearing the framework and reconstructing inward, all while safeguarding the exterior. The project promised intricacy and lengthy duration. Budget projections started at roughly $50 million. Deeper probes pushed it to $80 million, then $100 million. Ultimate tallies indicated the full revamp might top $150 million. Factoring in acquisition costs, the overall outlay neared $350 million. Sorrente pressed on. They brought on an architect and specialists. Approvals came through. Timelines were set. Construction kicked off in early 2019. Notices went to occupants. They'd need to leave briefly during the process. The company promised re-entry post-completion. By March 2019, the space cleared out. Final renters boxed up and relocated provisionally. A few intended to come back. Others seized the chance for sleeker quarters in modern towers. The Flatiron building, quiet for the first time since 1902, awaited change. Scaffolds enveloped the outside. Teams tackled the terracotta. Every piece underwent scrutiny. Damaged parts got flagged for swaps. Progress crawled. Artisans worked to replicate century-old material in hue, feel, and scale. Sourcing makers for exact matches dragged on for months. Work started indoors by dismantling unnecessary sections of the structure. Interior walls came down, revealing the underlying steel framework. Obsolete electrical lines were stripped out and plumbing lines were severed. The blueprints specified completely modernized systems, suited for contemporary needs, yet harmonious with the landmark's heritage. However, by March 2020, merely a year into the project, the COVID-19 outbreak arrived in New York. Building efforts decelerated and eventually ceased. Crews were instructed to leave the site. Deliveries of materials got held up. Authorities halted all non-critical construction across the city for an extended period. The Flatiron building's overhaul was put on indefinite hold. The pandemic's fallout rippled well past the work zone. Visitor numbers in New York plummeted. Madison Square, typically buzzing with people snapping pictures of the Flatiron, turned desolate. Property values for commercial spaces tumbled as businesses shifted to working from home. What had been vital office environments suddenly felt dispensable. Interest in Midtown Manhattan leases vanished. Sorrento Group encountered severe money troubles. Even prior to the crisis, their Italian headquarters was burdened by heavy debts. The shutdowns only deepened the troubles. Earnings from their property holdings plunged sharply. Lenders started demanding repayment. Come August 2020, the Italian parent firm declared bankruptcy. The Flatiron building found itself mired in judicial uncertainty. Overhaul activities ground to a halt. The structure sat vacant. Protective netting lingered over the exterior. Ownership had transferred to an Italian bankruptcy tribunal. Rival claimants scrambled for holdings. Prospective purchasers weighed if the Flatiron was viable amid its tangled legal and monetary complications. What began as months stretched into years. The edifice stayed unlit. New York's signature landmark turned into its starkest symbol of neglect. Sightseers still captured images of it, though now those shots featured protective barriers and enclosures rather than vibrant design. After enduring 117 years, it wasn't age that brought the building low, but financial pressures. The era before Sorrento's purchase featured a string of proprietors, each recognizing the Flatiron's promise yet failing to turn it into a viable enterprise. They acquired it with ambitious schemes that ultimately collapsed. The financial math stayed consistent. Upkeep expenses outstripped potential office revenues. Repurposing for homes promised the strongest profits, but the Landmarks Preservation Commission vetoed those ideas. McClough pioneered the condo strategy back in the late 1990s. He envisioned high-end residences fetching millions apiece. Its prime spot at Manhattan's core seemed to support the proposal. Still, regulators insisted the shift would undermine the site's historic value. The ruling stood unchallenged. MLO couldn't contest it further. A subsequent proprietor explored a small luxury hotel format. Accommodations within such a famed structure might fetch top-dollar prices. Visitors flocked to the Flatiron anyway, so why not house them there? The idea held strong promotional appeal, yet it hit identical bureaucratic walls. Adapting the workspaces into guest suites demanded major alterations to the bones of the place. Regulators would doubtless turn that down too. All the while, the Flatiron persisted as office quarters, though its occupants evolved. Established companies requiring up-to-date facilities departed. Budget-conscious groups with modest means moved in. Certain levels went to fledgling ventures and artistic outfits that prized the prestige over cutting-edge features. Additional stories lingered unoccupied for long stretches. Lease fees couldn't climb high enough to offset the mounting upkeep demands. Lessees at standard prices anticipated steady cooling, swift lifts, and robust web access. The Flatiron delivered these sporadically at best. Proprietors held pricing modest to sustain tenancy, ensuring income fell short of what's needed for a full-scale upgrade. This setup fueled a damaging loop. Neglected fixes accelerated the decline. Worsening state repelled premium renters. Reduced earnings squeezed repair budgets further. The decline unfolded steadily, yet inescapably. By 2010, the terracotta exterior demanded urgent fixes. Multiple blocks had detached, compelling the city to mandate safety netting. It spanned portions of the surrounding walkways, preventing any plummeting fragments from harming pedestrians. Intended as short-term, the netting endured for years as owners delayed expensive exterior work. Within, issues mounted discreetly. The power grid strained under heavier demands. Blackouts hit select levels, occupants lodged grievances, proprietors handled isolated fixes but ignored core flaws. Lines laid in 192 weren't built for non-stop power draws from devices like computers, servers, and similar gear. The heating and cooling setup grew ever more erratic. During the summer, intense heat transformed the upper levels into sweltering spaces. In winter, despite the heating efforts, certain offices stayed chilly and uninviting. To cope, occupants resorted to personal fans and space heaters as makeshift aids for the building's deficient setup. This approach fell short of a real fix. It simply highlighted the system's shortcomings. Skepticism rippled through the real estate sector when Sorrente acquired the property in 2018. Given the steep acquisition cost and the massive, already identified renovation expenses, not to mention potential hidden ones that could balloon further. Yet, Sorrente brought proven expertise in tackling challenging heritage sites, undertaking ventures deemed unfeasible by peers, bolstered by funding from their Italian headquarters. The ingredients for triumph appeared aligned. Post-acquisition assessments unveiled the true extent of the issues. Beyond superficial fixes, the exterior demanded comprehensive overhaul with entire terracotta segments, requiring outright substitution. Beneath, the steel framework exhibited rust that necessitated remediation. The undertaking involved erecting scaffolding encircling the whole structure, advancing level by level over an extended period, spanning months or even years, while the core steel frame remained stable overall. It called for thorough examination and upkeep. Experts evaluated each girder and support. Where decay appeared, it involved abrasive cleaning, followed by protective coatings. Certain parts could require bolstering. A century plus of weathering from dampness and fluctuating weather had taken its toll. On a brighter note, the underpinnings held firm, with the original deep steel pilings anchored into Manhattan's bedrock, continuing to perform reliably. A standout amid the extensive repair roster. The ground level required no intervention, but every element overhead did. Sorrente crafted an intricate restoration blueprint. Initial stage focused on the exterior, erecting the scaffolding, scrutinizing each section, swapping out compromised areas, and restoring the underlying steel framework through cleaning and safeguarding. Subsequent phase, targeted electrical and water systems, incorporating fresh cabling, piping, and fittings throughout. The third installment introduced a state-of-the-art climate control setup to ensure steady comfort and moisture levels across every story. Fourth came the elevator overhauls, installing quicker, updated models. Final stage, reshaped internal areas for adaptable workspaces, all while honoring the site's historic character. Planners projected the full endeavor to unfold over 3 to 5 years. Expenses, as noted before, were pegged between $50 million and exceeding $100 million, contingent on unforeseen complications surfacing amid the process. Sorrente lined up funding via their Italian parent entity and financiers, who recognized the potential in a thoughtfully revived landmark. By March 2019, logistics were finalized. Approvals granted, teams assembled, timelines set, residents relocated, and the structure vacated, marking its first full clearance ever. Scaffolding started ascending the frontage. Teams dove in. Initial advances proved promising. Terracotta sections were delicately extracted and inventoried. Flawed pieces were flagged for renewal, while sound ones underwent washing and safekeeping for later refitting. The concealed steel frame emerged, visible again since 192. Specialists carried out evaluations. Much of it fared better than anticipated, although targeted spots demanded attention. Within non-visible zones, dismantling advanced. Outdated infrastructure was stripped away, conduits prepped for upgrades, and utility areas prepped for contemporary installs. The labor was grimy, loud, and labor-intensive, yet it stuck to the plan in those opening weeks. That changed in March 2020 when the global health emergency halted operations. New York imposed shutdowns. Laborers were dismissed. Job sites citywide cleared out. The Flatiron joined countless initiatives stalled by the outbreak. What began as a brief intermission dragged on for months once work restarted. Limits on crew numbers and protocols for protection hampered momentum. Shipments of materials from global sources faced postponements or outright halts. Logistics networks crumbled. Timelines lost all relevance. Yet, the fiscal fallout from the crisis hit Sorrente harder than mere setbacks in building. Their holdings in Europe and the U.S. saw drastic income drops. Dining spots, shops, and workspaces shuttered. Occupants withheld payments. Asset worth plummeted. The firm, solid on paper in 2018, grappled with cash shortages by mid-2020. Sorrente's Italian overseer already shouldered heavy borrowing pre-crisis. Lenders, tolerant in prosperous eras, grew restless amid the downturn and pressed for settlements. Liquidity evaporated. In August 2020, Sorrente Respa sought bankruptcy protection in Italy. The Flatiron, held by Sorrente's U.S. arm, got entangled in the insolvency. An Italian tribunal oversaw the corporate holdings. Claimants submitted demands. Interested parties started probing, weighing chances to snag the property at a bargain from the estate. Work on the renovations failed to pick up again in earnest. Occasional efforts persisted here and there, yet lacking consistent financial support and direction. Advancements were negligible. The scaffolding lingered in place. The structure stayed unlit. New York's most iconic photo subject lingered in stasis, stalled from advancing or reclaiming its former glory. The COVID-19 crisis didn't merely halt the Flatiron building's overhaul. It reshaped the landscape of commercial property in the city. Firms that once mandated in-office presence for their staff found that working from home proved more effective than anticipated. Conferences shifted to virtual platforms. Files moved to digital storage. Output held steady far better than executives had anticipated. This shift brought swift repercussions. Businesses that had rented out full levels of office towers started shrinking their operations. Certain contracts lapsed without extension. Additional ones got reworked for reduced areas. Interest in Midtown Manhattan workspaces plummeted. Property holders throughout the area watched as empty spaces surged to heights not witnessed in generations. For the already vacant Flatiron, the fallout manifested differently. Yet it proved just as ruinous, since its worth hinged on future leasing revenue. With the office sector crumbling, even a polished-up Flatiron would face challenges, attracting renters ready to cover the premiums required to offset restoration expenses. The financial hurdles, already steep in 2019, turned virtually insurmountable by 2021. The tourism sector, another vital pillar of the Flatiron's appeal, crumbled as well. Madison Square, typically bustling with global sightseers, turned desolate. Eateries and lodgings shuttered. Survivors scraped by on sharply curtailed earnings. The prime spot, a core strength of the edifice, diminished in worth amid the absence of crowds. The insolvency process in Italy stretched into 2020 and 2021. The tribunal handling the matter sought to dissect the Sorrente Group's holdings and allocate recoveries to claimants. The Flatiron loomed large as a major asset in the collection, but equally as a burdensome obligation. Prospective purchasers would inherit not only the property, but the duty to finish the upgrades. Claimants vied for leverage. A few pushed for an urgent auction of the site, even at a bargain to recoup portions of their losses. Others contended that holding off could let the industry rebound, boosting its price. The insolvency judge considered the arguments, but delivered scant binding rulings. The matter bogged down in procedural chaos. All the while, the building hung in uncertainty. The temporary framework, meant to shield passers-by amid exterior fixes, morphed into a fixture. Set up originally for public safety during cladding tasks, it now merely shrouded the facade with no activity underneath. Municipal rules demanded it stay until the exterior got mended, though the ongoing dispute left no resources for fixes. Within, the demolition halted halfway. Certain areas had been gutted to their metal frames. Others sat undisturbed exactly as occupants abandoned them in 2019. Workstations lingered in spots. Storage units held paperwork. It resembled a scene where the staff had stepped out for a meal and simply never returned. Safeguarding the site posed challenges. A deserted tower in Midtown drew in those without homes hunting refuge, taggers eyeing blank walls and thrill-seekers probing its depths. Managers brought on security to monitor the grounds, yet round-the-clock vigilance over 22 levels drained funds. Barriers sealed select doorways against intruders. Officials stepped in too. The buildings department slapped on repeated citations for ignored maintenance. The clay facing kept eroding. Additional sections fractured. Dangers from plummeting fragments escalated. Authorities warned of penalties unless efforts restarted, though they lacked firm power to compel a distressed owner to comply. Those in architecture circles observed with mounting alarm. The Flatiron stood as a cornerstone relic from America's pioneering high-rise days. Its impact on design echoed far beyond hype. Structures globally echoed its daring approach, merging aesthetics and utility in tight urban confines. Allowing its decline would mean a setback, not just for the city but for worldwide design heritage. Advocacy bodies probed options for action. The National Trust for Historic Preservation flagged the Flatiron among its at-risk icons. Community efforts weighed gathering resources to rescue it, but the required sum proved overwhelming. Pulling together $100 million or beyond via contributions seemed unfeasible. Rescue demanded a wealthy investor with enduring commitment. A handful of interested parties ran inspections. All withdrew upon reviewing the finances, acquiring the structure, completing the upgrades, and the unpredictability of leasing it out soon after. Would-be done all formed a financial puzzle that simply didn't add up, especially for those investors hoping for solid profits in a timely manner. By 2022, things had settled into a grim kind of stasis. Conditions weren't improving, yet they weren't plummeting either. The edifice remained upright, its scaffolding unmoved. Court battles stretched on endlessly. Occasional talks between prospective purchasers and the bankruptcy tribunal fizzled out without results. The Flatiron building, that enduring symbol, seemed trapped in a moment, blocked from advancing, yet unwilling to fade away. As visitors flocked back to New York with travel picking up, they still gathered at Madison Square for snapshots. But now those images captured the barriers and skeletal frames too. Souvenirs in local stores depicted the Flatiron in its prime, glossing over the present disarray. The gap between its storied allure and actual plight was impossible to ignore. Regional papers ran updates every couple of months, chronicling the stagnation. Every piece echoed the prior ones, varying only in minor facts. The place stayed vacant. The insolvency proceedings lingered unresolved. Overhaul plans stayed on hold. Interested parties scouted it, but offers never materialized. The narrative stayed bleakly unchanging. In 2023, fresh hurdles surfaced. Certain lenders, in the bankruptcy matter, claimed the extended holdup was eroding the property's worth. The more it sat idle, the tougher leasing it out later would prove. The city's commercial real estate scene wasn't rebounding as hoped by the hopefuls. Telecommuting held strong appeal. Numerous firms had slashed their workspace needs for good. Another set of discussions kicked off among the court and various stakeholders. A few debt holders pushed to slash the sale price to draw in committed bidders. Opponents countered that unloading it cheaply would shortchange Sorrente's creditors. The judge listened to debates and mulled choices, yet delivered scant, firm rulings. Come 2024, word spread of a coalition of local real estate pros banding together to possibly acquire it. Their strategy reportedly included wrapping up the fixes and shifting certain levels to hybrid purposes, such as mixed-use setups blending workspaces with arts or learning venues. Any shift would need green lighting from the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Initial chats hinted at flexibility toward innovative fixes that safeguarded the icon while making it viable financially. When this account was penned in early 2025, no closing agreement had surfaced. Control rested with a bankruptcy court-linked body in Italy. Deal-making pressed on. Would-be owners assessed paths forward. Officials noted infractions. Heritage advocates observed closely, while the Flatiron building loomed quiet, its panes blacked out, halls deserted. The city's premier landmark mired in its most drawn-out limbo ever. The Flatiron's void highlights a core irony in safeguarding history. It gained safeguards exactly for its design and cultural weight. Iconic designation aimed to secure its endurance. Yet those very safeguards imposed limits that thwarted viable operations. Demolitions off-limits, but reshaping for today's demands proves equally daunting. The finances bite hard. An overhaul topping $100 million demands hefty lease revenues to pay off. Even in peak times, its spots in the Flatiron could command top dollar thanks to prime spot and fame. Still, it falls short of what businesses crave now. Expansive layouts can't happen because of the wedge shape and rules enforcing the hall configurations. Cutting-edge systems for tech would squeeze into a pre-digital, pre-H, VAC, pre-wired for communications relic. Supposing those hurdles cleared, tenant interest stays iffy. Post-outbreak, Manhattan's office sector shifted deeply. Firms want smaller footprints. Distance labor's now standard in heaps of fields. Empty rates in top-tier towers citywide climbed. Rivalry for occupants sharpened. The Flatiron would vie against fresher rivals, providing all it misses, often at similar or cheaper costs. Repurposing for homes seemed promising, though the Landmarks Preservation Commission kept turning those ideas down. The rules aren't capricious. They're there to shield key traits from profit-driven ruin. The Flatiron served as offices from 1902. That ongoing role carries its own legacy. Converting the inside into residential units would wipe out this legacy. The contradiction grows even more pointed. Overly stringent safeguards can ironically pose the biggest threat. A structure unable to produce income will inevitably decay. No matter how robust the legal barriers against tearing it down, keeping something intact demands upkeep. Upkeep demands funds. Funds derive from practical application. When rules render profitable operation unattainable, the edifice gradually crumbles. Various U.S. cities have wrestled with comparable dilemmas. Take the Woolworth Building, yet another pioneering high-rise in Lower Manhattan, which endured prolonged monetary woes until a developer repurposed its top levels into upscale condos back in 2015. Authorities greenlit that initiative since the structure had originally been planned as offices, topped with living quarters. There was established history for it. The Flatiron lacked any such backstory. In other places, iconic sites vanished completely. The Singer Building, formerly the world's loftiest tower, met the wrecking ball in 1968. Prior to the advent of protection statutes, laws might have shielded it. Pennsylvania Station, referenced before, was razed in 1963. Such losses jolted societal awareness and spurred the establishment of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Yet now, advocates encountered a fresh hurdle. Preventing teardowns marked a victory. Devising economically viable paths forward for these structures proved a tougher nut to crack. Certain specialists argue that guidelines must adapt over time. Sticking rigidly to the initial purpose can doom edifices to a slow demise through abandonment. Allowing some leeway might enable repurposing that safeguards essential heritage aspects, even as the buildings adapt to today's financial landscape. Critics, however, caution that excessive leniency could tempt investors to gut the very qualities that render these sites preservable. Government incentives present an alternative route. Officials might bolster the safeguarding of culturally vital properties via incentives like tax credits, subsidies, or outright aid. New York runs a few initiatives aiding landmark restorations, though nothing matches the magnitude needed for a gem like the Flatiron. A figure like $150 million far outstrips what typical public efforts can inject into a commercial venture. Collaborative ventures between public and private entities have been considered. The municipality might assume control of the property and team up with a business operator who brings know-how and partial financing in return for extended leasing or shared stakes. Such setups have succeeded in other spots. But the Flatiron's tangled legal and monetary issues complicated any such deals. The notion of turning it into a museum or interpretive venue kept surfacing. Repurposing the Flatiron as a showcase for architectural history or the story of New York would carry deep resonance. The structure stands as a relic in its own right. Guests could immerse in early 1900s interiors while exploring the development of tall building design. Still, museums need reliable ongoing budgets. Admissions alone seldom offset all expenses. Any such scheme would demand a substantial trust fund or sustained backing to endure for generations. A small-scale inn hovered as a conceptual option. The Flatiron attracts plenty of sightseers. Offering overnight stays within could bring in cash flow without fully sacrificing its period charm. Lodging spaces wouldn't need vast open layouts. Tight hallways would suit a hotel nicely. Chambers could be compact yet stylish. The hurdle would be persuading the Landmarks Preservation Commission that a hotel shift upholds enough of the site's authentic essence. A blended approach, merging various functions, might yield the most workable outcome. Ground levels could stay as workspaces or shift to exhibit areas. Intermediate stories could host guest rooms. Top tiers, boasting the finest panoramas, might even turn into residences if regulators accepted that selective changes were vital for the building's longevity. This variety of roles would spread out income sources and lessen reliance on one sector. None of these paths advanced far, as title lingered mired in insolvency processes. The Italian court overseeing Sorrente's holdings couldn't retain the asset forever. Yet it also couldn't offload it without creditor consensus. In the interim, the Flatiron remained dormant, its destiny hanging in the balance. The past provides cautions alongside optimism. Numerous structures weathered seemingly hopeless ordeals. Mar-a-Lago, noted early in this account, teetered on destruction during the late 1980s. Its proprietors struggled to sustain it financially. Bulldozers were poised. It endured thanks to an innovative fix. Shifting to a members-only club sparked debate, but supplied the earnings required to uphold the property. The key variance was oversight. Mar-a-Lago never contended with the constraints imposed by a landmarks preservation body. The property owner enjoyed the liberty to reshape the site in economically viable ways. The Flatiron building lacks such leeway. What safeguards it also confines it. Ironically, the structure's renown could be the very factor dooming its endurance. Were the Flatiron less legendary, it might have undergone updates or modifications away from the public eye. Yet any suggestion involving one of America's most famous landmarks draws intense, focused discussion and resistance. Advocacy organizations ensure that all initiatives face rigorous examination. The Landmarks Preservation Commission proceeds with care, aware that its rulings establish benchmarks. Come 2025, the Flatiron building lingered in uncertainty. Structurally, it endures, its iron framework sturdy amid prolonged disuse. The clay exterior is crumbling gradually. In its vacant condition, the edifice could persist for many more years. However, mere endurance differs from vitality. New York's premier photo subject has morphed into a symbol of its inherent contradiction. Valued too highly to vanish, restricted too severely for lucrative growth, celebrated too prominently for subtle changes, secured by statutes that preserve its appearance but not its prospects. Its vacancy represents both a sorrow and a cautionary tale. Symbols do not endure forever. Popularity fails to cover upkeep costs. Safeguards lacking sustainability lead only to gradual decay. Can the Flatiron last another 100 years? Undoubtedly so. Can it revive as a bustling hub teeming with activity and intent? That query lingers unresolved. Within these dual dilemmas stretches the divide between safeguarding and thriving, a divide that grows broader annually as the structure looms vacant and hushed, awaiting a resolution that appears ever more elusive.